So, first question I'm going to ask you. Okay, this will give us information about what direction to go in. Right? So I'm going to start. I'm going to ask you, are you aware of the moments when your body is awake, relaxed, alert, your mind is quiet, and you're just simply present? Is this something that you are aware of that happens to you every once in a while on a regular basis?
It happens now on a much more regular basis. It happened this morning while I was walking, and I just surrendered to the moment. When I reached the top, it was this pure moment, body flowing, feeling very pure, very free. The mind was just present where it was supposed to be.
And you got there walking in nature.
Yeah, there's many different ways I get there.
There's many different ways. So it's important to note the different ways that you suddenly find yourself in that space. Because what we want to learn, we want to experience, is that it's a function of our biology. The body is in the right place at the right time, under the right conditions, and suddenly you're present. This is a function of your biology. If you eat well, rest well, exercise well, stretch well, do everything well, you have a higher chance of it happening more often. If you poison yourself on a regular basis, then you have a lower chance of it happening more often. You need to be an adult, physically an adult. You must have reached puberty, because your body, and I'll go into the details of it, won't be physically complex enough as a child. And it's not complex enough to have this experience yet. She's almost 7. By the time she's 14, she will be able to have this experience. So the first is you need to have a physically mature body. So you need to have finished puberty, at least entered puberty. Yeah? It needs to be functioning, so being able to touch your fingers intentionally in a complex form, right, is a necessity. So your body needs to be functioning as an organic unity. You need to have sight from birth. If you were born blind, you will not be able to have this experience. Same if you were born deaf. You will not have a complete enough biology to be able to have the experience we're going to describe. You can have all sorts of other amazing experiences. You are no less a person because you don't have fingers or eyes or ears, but you will not be able to have the experience that only an organic unity can have. A full functional, organic, mature Homo sapiens sapiens. Right? Does that make sense? This has been studied for thousands of years. Those are the minimal requirements. You get, and one more thing. You also need to be fluent in a language that allows you to have this experience. English is one of those languages. Hindi is one of those languages. Pali is one of those languages. Chinese, I'm not sure of all the dialects, but at least one of them, and Japanese are languages in which you can have this experience because they describe reality in a complex enough manner that you can become aware of the experience. If you are missing anything in your body or in your mind, you will not have this particular experience. And it's similar to the plant. Plants have been flowering for, I don't know, almost 500,000 years, 300 million years or something like that, 500 million, 500 million years. But in order for the plant to actually grow vegetatively, it just needs some air, some water, some nutrients, some soils, and just about any seed will grow green. But in order for it to flower, it's going to need certain unique conditions, the right temperature conditions, the right nutrient conditions, the right light conditions. So in order for you to have your flowering, you need to be a complete, mature, adult human being that has met certain minimal requirements. And we're going to discuss what those minimal requirements are, because if you can provide them for you, you will start having spontaneous flowerings on a regular basis. And that's step one. How to have continuous peak experience, intuitive flashes, being present in the moment on a regular basis. How to create the conditions for this to happen whenever you need it. Does that make sense? Yeah. So imagine that you are crossing an unknown territory in the dark. It's a dark, stormy night. And you don't have any lights with you. There isn't enough starlight or moonlight. It's all cloud. It's dark. You don't know which way you need to go. You know you need to go north, and maybe there's the mountain that you're going to that is headed towards the north. But you can't see it, right? Suddenly, there's a flash of lightning. And you have a sense of which way you're going. The mountain is off to the left. So you can adjust your course and you can start walking in that direction. But there's trees, there's rocks, there's challenges along the way, right? Another lightning flash occurs, and you see that you're closer, but now it's to the right. So you adjust your course. Right? You can rely on these accidental lightning flashes to guide you which way to go. Now, if you sit and you look for the lightning flash, and as soon as the lightning flash happens, you try to look at the lightning, it blinds you, and then you don't see which way to go. So you're not looking for the lightning. You don't want to see the lightning. You want to see what the lightning will illuminate. Yeah? Does that make sense? Yeah. So you have, as an organic unity, you have a capacity to generate a pulse of awareness, a pulse of light that will happen. It's part of your biology. How to do that? How to have that intuitive flash. You know what I'm talking about? You've had an intuitive flash ever in your life, right? If you're a human being and you have eyes and ears and you're past puberty, you have the capacity of having an intuitive flash. So what happened? What's the biology of that? How can you have intuitive flashes as needed? Wouldn't it be nice to be able to set a flash off? You know those old flash bulbs, right? You're lost in the dark and you look at it, you blind yourself. So you just set off a flash and you see where you are, and now you know which way to go. You can set a flash off every minute, every hour, every day, as needed, right? Does that make sense? So how to access that intuitive flash that your biology has all by itself. A spark of insight, a spark of creativity, a spark of intuition, something that you would call a spark or you've known it. There's something happening.
Something that can't, it's not something you can actively feel, it has to just come, it arises within.
You can't think it because when you're thinking, you're interfering with the mechanism that allows it to happen. Okay? So, a couple of metaphors or analogies. The first one is the pendulum. If you look at a pendulum, it swings, and no matter how fast or slow it's swinging, it's always passing through its center for a split moment. Right? And then it keeps going. That pendulum can slow down, it'll stop exactly over its center. But it's always crossing its center. Now, your awareness, your consciousness, right? It gets pulled in many, many different directions. So it's like a pendulum that's just swinging around in all sorts of directions. So it's a pattern to it. You can simplify the pattern so that the pendulum just swings in a very simple, regular manner. And every time it's over its center, and every time it's at its edges, it pauses. It pauses at the edges, and it's always aligned for a split moment. How to tune yourself, how to tune your body, so that you can recognize those moments. Create a lifestyle that will allow these moments to happen more often is what we're looking for. That's the point of what we're discussing. So, when these moments happen once, it's great, it's amazing, twice, 3 times, 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times. At some point, if you can create, once you create the conditions for them to happen on a regular basis, you will get used to them and you'll drop into them. And one day you'll recognize that you can stay in that space and work your way out. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for how to create the conditions so that these occur so often that they become nothing special, because the reality is that they're nothing special, they're ordinary. By making them special, by making them magical, by making them mystical, by making them spiritual, we're creating a projection with our mind that interferes with our capacity to drop into that moment. We start chasing after them, and then we don't find them. Because as soon as you start pushing that pendulum or try manipulating it to go to one direction or another, you are now taking it off center, so it's not going to find its center. That's the first metaphor, the first analogy. The second one is of a walkie-talkie. Our nervous system is a two-way nervous system. If the antenna is straight, the battery is charged, it's turned on in scan mode, the walkie-talkie will receive, beep, it's ready. It will receive all the transmissions from whatever is happening around it. The instant I press that talk button, regardless of whether I'm speaking or not, it's not receiving. These intuitive flashes can only occur when you're not thinking or projecting or dreaming or desiring or fearing or hoping or wanting or scheming or plotting or chasing or like as the minute you're doing something with this, you're pressing the button and it is no longer receiving. Does that make sense? So the first thing to recognize and to be aware of is that you need to create the conditions so that you can drop into those intuitive moments, into those creative flashes. And you need to understand the science, the biology of them. They're part of your neurophysiology. They only occur when you're not thinking, you're not projecting, consciously or unconsciously. So an unconscious thought is still a little button. Yeah, so the human walkie-talkie has 1,000,000 talk buttons, and most people have about 999,999 on at any given time. It's just because, well, I'm not thinking, I'm quiet, home. Doesn't mean that all my other unconscious buttons aren't on also. It just means that this one channel is not on, right? So you have to identify all the different thought channels that you have and stop turning them on, right? Now, in order for this system to work properly, the antenna needs to be in good shape and the battery needs to be charged. So we're going to talk about just the mechanics of what you need in order for this to happen. Okay? So there's some essentials. The first essential has to do with the first intelligence that all life has, which is breathing. The exchange of gases in an intelligent manner, in a conscious manner, taking in oxygen and putting out CO2, or in the case of plants, bringing in CO2 and putting out oxygen, is the first intelligence that we have. It is an unconscious intelligence. You don't need to think about it for it to happen. You don't need to be aware of it for it to happen. But you do need to know something about it, which is, if you're not breathing properly, you're putting yourself into stress. And that stress will prevent your body from being present. So breath awareness, the biology of breath awareness, is that for any given situation, you need the right combination and the right amount of oxygen coming in and carbon dioxide going out. And that's everybody. Now, what do you need when you're sleeping is different than what you need when you're just sitting and resting, which is different from what you need when you're standing. It's different from what you need when you are hiking, climbing a mountain, or dancing, or working, or digging a hole. All right? So your breath awareness allows you to identify what breath you need in order for your body, this form, to have what it needs in order to be not taken out of the present. Does that make sense? So there's breathing exercises that you can learn. Yoga, for example, different pranayamas, where you can practice how many different, there's 100 different ways of breathing, through one nostril, out the other nostril, fast, slow then fast then slow, right? Deep, shallow, stomach, like this. And what I did is I went out and I studied a couple dozen different ways of doing it. And I practiced them until I could feel, and I was aware of what they were doing to my body. If I breathe in this manner, how does it feel? If I breathe in that manner, how does it feel? And I practiced them over and over and over again. And then I stopped practicing. Because if I use my breath to create a state, it's not spontaneous. Because there's a desire to create a state. So I'm turning on my mind and saying, now I'm going to breathe in this way. It has a very special name. Or not. It doesn't matter. Yeah? And as soon as I do that, I am now pressing the button on the walkie-talkie. And the danger of that is that if you intentionally use your mind to put yourself in a state, that your mind will create an image of that state, and it will project an image of that state, and you will believe that you are in that state, but you are not. You are in a projected image of that state. It's a form of hypnosis. We're going to discuss that as well. I'm just planting little seeds. Right? I want to give you all the information you need, the basics that you need about breath, and then I'll add in more and more things. Right?
But isn't that not the case that if you have these breathing, for example, a meditative state, it's not about the meditation, but because you're in this state, then eventually you will become more aware in real life. So it's just a practice in your bubble, and then you can go up. You know what I mean?
What I would invite you to try for yourself, right? That's all I can say, because I did it for myself and it worked. And there are others who have reported similar types of experiences. Is that you go and you practice a dozen or two different types of breathing exercises until you really understand it, and just put your awareness into what you're feeling in that moment, right? And then stop practicing them, and then just simply be aware, be mindful of your breath, what it's doing at any given time. But don't direct it. Just watch it. And you'll notice that sometimes your breath is constricted and tight in your chest, and that may match when you're feeling a certain type of emotion. Maybe you're feeling angry or scared or tight. Right? But just watch it. And don't do anything about it. Learn what the different options are, and then allow your body to figure itself out. Right? Now, you can remember to take a breath. Right. So, right now you just yawned.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? It means you're not getting enough oxygen. It means you're not breathing enough for this experience. And because you're not breathing enough, your system is not getting enough oxygen. It's not functioning at peak capacity. And you're now entering overwhelm. And you've reached saturation point already. And you're at a saturation point. And if I keep putting water into your glass, and I keep putting more water into your glass, and I keep adding more water to your cup, eventually what's going to happen? Right, so when you yawn, you're here. You're right there. You just took a breath, which means you took a little sip out of that. So now take a sip out of that. And now you're there. And I'm going to keep talking, and in 3 minutes you're going to be there again. Right? When you're in that space, you're not at peak performance, and there's no way of sustaining yourself in that space. Does that make sense? That's how sensitive it is. That's how important it is. And I saw you yawning before. You both yawned a couple of times already. I just didn't bring it up until the right moment. Right? Does that make sense? So, you study yourself. I'm yawning now. What does that mean? What does that feel? What do I need to do? Well, you need to take some nice deep breaths. Maybe sit in a position that allows you, your body, because your physiology is scrunching your lungs, right? So there's a biology to how you take care of your body. We're going to get to posture later. It's like number 5. But breath is first. And already you've both experienced a need to yawn, which means you're not giving enough fuel to your nervous system. You need oxygen. Your body needs oxygen, right? If I was going to, when you're climbing the mountain, you need to put more, your blood pressure needs to go up to climb that mountain, right? If you're driving a car or a motorbike and you're going up a hill, you need to accelerate as you're going into the hill. Because you need to have power to be able to go up to the top before you go back down again the other side. Right? So with my breath awareness, because I've done a series of breathing exercises, and I'll describe them for you and show you how you can do them. I'm aware of my breath, and because I'm aware of my breath, and I've experienced it, and I understand the science behind it, I know what it's doing to my body. So I know how to prepare myself for any given situation just using my breath. And that's huge. That's a huge percentage of how to be present is just monitoring your breath. Right? Does that make sense? All right. So since you're already both overwhelmed, let's just do some breathing exercises so that you can. All right. So the first breath that for me is the most valuable is a breath where what I do is that I, without having to count so much, to a count of 5, breath in, I hold for a moment, and then I exhale to a count of 5, and I hold for a moment, and I learn how to do that so that I don't have to count anymore, because if I'm counting, I'm using my mind to count, and I just need the body I need to learn timing. Not what time it is, it doesn't matter, just a sense of timing, right? So the way to do that is just to practice it until you just get it, and your body should be able to breathe at a certain frequency, a certain rhythm, without having to think about it. That'll take a little bit of exercise, like practicing with a hula hoop. Remember learning how to tie your shoelaces? You had to think about it until you did it enough times, and now you shouldn't have to think about tying your shoelaces. So here's the breath. It's very simple. I'm going to do it, and I'll count with my fingers, and you just breathe in, hold, and then breathe out. Okay? And I'm going to count 3 times, and do it while you're doing it, and I'm going to invite you to keep going on your own. Eyes open, eyes closed makes no difference. And what you're looking for, your awareness is in how you feel in your body and the activity of your mind. You should find moments when the mind pauses, and then it starts up again. And this is built into your wiring of your system. At the top of each breath and at the bottom of each breath, your mind will stop. Like a pendulum stops before it comes back down. Stops before it comes back down. Stops. So you want to synchronize your awareness to your breath and how the physiology of your mind is functioning. And there's a recent study that came out, and I'll find the reference for you. I saved it. Of how the nervous system is wired. It's wired such that your breathing is linked to your thinking activity. Yeah, it's actually been mapped out. So when your breath stops, for a split second, your thinking stops. Okay, so this is what we're looking for. And allowing oxygen and carbon dioxide to balance themselves in your body. Right? So it goes like this.
Stop breathing and you stop thinking.
Yeah, that's it. Right? And it's important. When you stop breathing, you're going to stop thinking. For many, the experience of not thinking feels like suffocation. And it scares them, so then they don't go into it. But it's just an imprint. It's a false flag. It's a false feeling. It's a real feeling. You're feeling that you are suffocating, but you need to go through that.
That's what I mean. Because sometimes I feel like, and it feels like I'm dragged somewhere else, or
that's
flying off or something.
Right, because the mind needs to shut off, and if your entire world is identified to your mind, it feels like it's being pulled away, dragged off. It feels like you're suffocating and dying. That image that bubble is going to burst. I want to teach you how to burst all these thought bubbles, all these identification bubbles, these egos, which means being identified to a thought, feeling, experience, randomness, whatever it is. Right? So, we're breathing in, and so you want to sit balanced, relaxed, right? And we're going to breathe in. Just keep going on your own. Okay, now I'm going to ask you just to open your eyes. You can continue breathing that way. Just take a moment and now contemplate on your experience. Think about your experience. What did you experience? And how does it feel in your body? How does it feel in your being?
Pure relaxation.
Pure relaxation. Right. So to be purely relaxed, all you need to do is breathe properly. Sensations. Okay. So that's information that your body is giving you information about what's happening. So if you whatever you feel is what you're feeling. Now, one thing that's really important to understand is that this this existence, by default, the baseline for this existence is bliss, ecstasy, celebration, peace, joy. That's like the lowest common denominator. If you look around and you see the flowers, they're exploding in joy, ecstasy, and celebration. If a mosquito is attacking you, it's very alive. It knows that you're much bigger than it and you're going to slap it. It's very alive. It's having a blissful experience. Even when you slap it, it dies having a blissful experience. If you are having anything less than a fully relaxed, energized, blissful experience, it's because you're putting yourself out. It should be the baseline of how you wake up and how you live. And of course, every once in a while, you're going to stub your toe, and that's how you know where to put how to step more precisely in the moment, right? So whatever you're experiencing, you want to be aware of that because there's information there that you need to understand. Okay? So the first thing is that you might have not been breathing properly and you don't have enough oxygen in your system. And if you don't have enough oxygen in your system, the carbon dioxide ratio of oxygen to carbon dioxide goes up. And you have more carbon dioxide in your system, your blood acidifies. When your blood acidifies, your entire body functions differently than when your blood is neutral. And if you breathe more and you put more oxygen in, it changes the balance in your blood. It becomes more alkaline. The pH goes up. And then your entire body functions differently. So there's 3 different settings as far as your neurophysiology is concerned. One is pH neutral. You usually wake up at that setting. You've been sleeping well, your body's relaxed, it hasn't been thrashing around, it hasn't been climbing a mountain, it's just sleeping, and your breath is calm, relaxed. Not very deep, it doesn't need to be deep. You don't, it's like when your car is idling. It's just, and that's pH neutral, maybe slightly acidic. You get up and you start breathing. When you breathe properly, you are giving the right amount of oxygen and carbon dioxide you need for any given situation. Which means if you start climbing the steps and going up the mountain, your body should start breathing more. But if you sit and start thinking more, you also need to breathe more. Because your body is using more energy. An interesting study was done with professional chess players. So the typical person uses somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 calories of food a day, kilocalories of nutrients. A chess player does this. Waits for the other person, and then does this. And they spend up to 6,000 to 8,000 calories just doing that. Your brain's burning sugar. It's burning glucose. It needs oxygen. Right now, you're having an information experience, an overload. I'm going to give you an information. I'm going to overload you. I can can overload you every day for the next 3 weeks with information. And you need to be able to be present for it, right? And existence will overload you with information at times. So you need to know, what's the throttle position, right? How's the gas pedal? Is the gas pedal up or is it down? It's down because I'm accelerating, I'm going up a mountain, so I'm breathing more. But breathing, okay? So I went into a little more detail. So your nervous system has 3 settings. It turns out that the proteins of your nervous system, of your neurophysiology, and probably of your muscles as well, and many different parts of your body. Your cells have receptors on the outside. And these receptors are made up of proteins, and some have carbohydrates, and some have fats, lipids. And they're very, very specific. So if you, how to give you an example. If I take an egg, a raw egg, and I put it in hot water above 60 degrees, what happens to the proteins in the egg? They change shape, irreversibly, right? They denature and they change shape. If I take that same egg and I put it with lemon juice in it, they will also denature. If I put a strong alkali agent, they will also denature. All of your proteins will denature. So the pH range that you have in your body is a very small window. Your body typically runs at a pH of 6.8. And if you breathe in a certain way, you can raise that up just a little bit. And when it raises just a little bit, it might be 6.81, 6.82, just a very, very, very small amount. The proteins in your nervous system and in your physiology will change shape. And the ones that change shape, some of them will be receptors and neurotransmitters that will function differently. So it's like you have 3 different settings in your body. Imagine a vehicle that has neutral, drive, and reverse. Your entire body has something like that, like 3 different settings. Neutral, acidic, and alkaline.
And you told me the test players, do they breathe and also more during their...
Well, they must. They must. And that study
So
wasn't
their
done,
breath is
but their breath, they probably need to breathe. Well, that might make a difference between the one that wins or doesn't, right? The one who breathes better.
So right now I'm noticing that when I'm listening to you, sometimes I just stop breathing.
Yep.
So I should be breathing more and more.
So remind yourself just to keep breathing, right? And find the breath that works for you, for any given situation. Just like find the throttle setting that works for you when you're using a motorbike to go over the hill in Hadrin, right? It's like, it's steep, right? Does that make sense? You have to give your body what it needs at any given time. But your body doesn't know. Your body has to learn. And you learned, okay, so breathing. Breathing happens automatically, obviously. Right? You come out of the womb, you're born, and hopefully you start breathing by yourself. In modern cultures, sometimes we don't allow the child time to learn to start breathing by itself, so we slap it. Instead of just waiting for a minute. For example, letting the baby come out, leaving it connected to the umbilical cord, and just holding it there and doing nothing with it because you don't have to do anything with it. It's there all by itself. And seeing, allowing the baby to suddenly recognize the change of its environment and maybe open his eyes and start breathing. Instead, we pull it out, cut, slap, jig, boom, right? And we don't give the baby the time to do it by itself. And then we live with people who pay very, very little conscious awareness to their breath. Or, if you're surrounded by yogis, people who put too much conscious awareness into their breath and overdo it. Because all they're thinking is about how they have to be breathing, right? And it's about not having to think about it, but you have to learn the different things that you can do, right? So, it's not too late. You can re-educate your body to learn how to breathe the way it needs to for any given situation. For that, you need to train it. This is where establishing a yoga, a pranayama practice is of tremendous value because it shows you different ways that people breathe, that the body can breathe, so that you can breathe, so that your body can know what to do by itself. Right? Does that make sense? Now, there is value in putting your body through extremes. So just like you want to be able to just see what happens when you breathe regularly, you want to be able to see what happens when you breathe irregularly. So you should witness the different types of breathing patterns that you have, and then later, on your own, consciously replicate them. I hold my breath, I make my chest tight, skip breaths, and just do that and see what it does to you. And you might discover that it puts you into a state of anxiety, that it puts you into a state of stress, that your mind stops because it's like the parking brake has been pulled up. Other people will choose to go out and smoke a cigarette. Sometimes, the act of smoking a cigarette is the first full breath that they take that day. It happens to be full of poisons, but it's still the first full breath of the day. And then 30 minutes later, or an hour later, they have to go back to the smoking area or to the water cooler or whatever the situation is and take another breath. And maybe all they need to do is just take a breath and clean it. Now, in the case of something like a cigarette, we're going to talk about tools. The carbon monoxide will replace the oxygen blood, and it'll cut the oxygen supply to your brain, which will then force the nervous system to go into a temporary shutdown, and it'll stop overthinking. So if you wanted to stop overthinking, you can poison yourself to stop overthinking, right? Right? If your legs run too fast, I guess you could cut your feet off. Or you could think, wow, I have a capacity to overthink and think very rapidly. That could be of use. Why don't I tame that wild horse in a friendly way, in a gentle way, instead of violent way? Does that make sense? Take a breath. All right. I'm going to jump to number 2 because number 2 could be the reason why you keep yawning. So, your body is providing a tremendous amount of information for you, and we have culturally learned to ignore it. So the first one is, your breathing is giving you a lot of information, and you have to become an expert, a master in how you breathe, and how your breathing turns your mind on, turns it off, empowers you, disempowers you, because whatever you're doing with your breath, you're doing with your breath. I'm not pointing a gun to your head. You're doing it. So you need to steady your breath and bring your awareness back to just noticing what happens. And you'll notice that every time you bring your awareness to your breath, it'll change. That's okay. That's just the way it is. But if you can train yourself in different ways of breathing until you've got it, then you stop training. You just simply watch your breath. And then you watch to see what breath your body goes to next. Because what can happen is that you have a breath behavior pattern of tightening your breath or breathing in a certain way, speeding it up or slowing it down. And if you've learned it unconsciously, because you imprinted it from all the people around you. Because when you were born and you weren't allowed, maybe you weren't allowed to have a natural first breath. By people who weren't allowed to have a natural first breath, and then your breaths lose their natural pattern. And you want to open the doors. Let your body breathe the way it needs to breathe, but it needs to be educated. So give yourself a full education on breath, and then just watch, and your body will rebalance itself automatically. And sometimes you need to allow your body to get tight because you need to go into a fear or an anger that you've repressed. and you won't go into it by breathing and forcing your body to breathe in a way that relaxes you and being very om, shanti, shanti, whatever. And you're missing the experience of going into a tension or a stress or a fear. Because you need to know what those are, because those are actually influencing your breath as well. Those are the unconscious triggers for how you're breathing. They're linked to. Right? Because mind, body, mind is not a separate phenomenon. So whatever you're thinking, you're experiencing in your body. And you need to know what all your unconscious thoughts are so that you stop having them. In other words, you need to know where all the buttons are on the walkie-talkie so that the fingers isn't pressing on it. Right? So it's a little more complex than simply learning how to breathe in a way that relaxes you and forcing your body to do that. Because that won't allow you to discover the ways that you unconsciously create the problem in the first place. And if you didn't create the problem in the first place, your body would always be breathing the way it needs to, and you would remain at peak performance as far as breath is concerned. Right? Does that make sense? Yeah. Hydration. If you don't drink the amount of water that your body needs at any given moment, you immediately go into stress. Dehydration is a major cause of malfunction or overwhelm.
Just going back to the breath for a second. So you also just to figure out all the different types of breath and also to put your body in stress and see what comes up in this stress.
You need to become a student of how your body breathes. And for that, you want to be a student of how other bodies breathe and what's learned about breathing. Right? Just like if I want to learn how to dance, and I want to have my own freestyle way of moving, it's great to go and try 5 rhythms and maybe take a salsa class and do some ballroom and maybe learn cha-cha-cha and foxtrot. Not that I'm ever going to want to dance that way. Maybe I will. Maybe there'll be a nice party and we'll all be doing cha-cha-cha. Right? And it'll be fun for a bit. But if I give myself a range of motion, then I can surrender to it and just let go to it. If you give yourself a range of different breathing experiences, right, you can then, your body will then figure out what it needs to do. See, the body needs to be able to function without the mind telling it what to do. Everything in nature is functioning without a mind telling it what to do. You were born without a mind. There was no thought, there was no memory, there was no identification, there was nothing. You were just born and you started. And then you started imprinting and picking up behavior patterns of everything the people around you were doing. So however they were breathing, you're breathing. However they sat, you sit. However they ate, you ate. Whatever they ate, you ate. Whatever music they listened to, that's the music that you learned to enjoy. Whatever language they spoke, that's the language that you imprinted and you picked up. You were born a blank canvas, a pure white sponge. And wherever your sponge lands, it starts to absorb and imprint all the behaviors at all levels. Not just what you learn in kindergarten and in primary and secondary school, not just what you learn from your teachers, your preachers, your pastors, the people around you. Everything you've picked up. Humans are the only animals that are absolutely non-functional at birth. Every other animal can at least
Do something.
get up and walk over to its mother, cling, right? Find milk and drink. Babies, you can't do anything. You're not born ready yet. You're pulled out of the oven and you're not ready yet. The souffle hasn't finished cooking. You're still raw in the middle. Right? And it's going to take years for you to learn. And one more thing that's really important to understand is that you will have imprinted at least 75% of all of your life behaviors by the time you're 3 or 4 years old. Including how you breathe, how you sit, how you eat, how you approach life. And that'll be from everyone that you've been, everyone who's influenced you. Particularly your primary caregivers, your parents and teachers. Right? siblings, your older brother and sister, people like that. They're going to be the biggest influence on you and how you, what you learn. So you want to identify what those behavior patterns are and break out of them. Because you've learned them. You didn't have any behavior patterns. You could just breathe in and breathe out. That's it. Does that make sense? So, breathing, and we'll go more into it. I just want to give you the essentials. Right? So breathing is going to be important. You're going to have to become a master of your breathing. Hydration. You want to maintain balanced hydration levels. It's so easy to become dehydrated and not pay attention to it. So the first thing is to drink a big glass of water. When in doubt, drink a glass of water. Now, something to be said about water. This is about 1.5 liters of water. If you don't drink enough of it, your body goes into stress and tension, and it suffers, and you can actually die if you don't drink enough water. If you drink too much of it, you can also die of water poisoning. So you have to find out how much water you need for you. That will determine, that'll depend on you, your body type, your level of activity, the temperature, moisture, your stress levels. You have to become an expert on how much water do you need at any given time. So the first thing is that I've learned to never leave a source of water thirsty. I might leave my house hungry to go to a restaurant. I might want to go to the bar and have a beer or a glass of wine or whatever, it doesn't really matter, with a friend, or go to the juice bar and have a juice. But I leave my house hydrated first. I leave my house hungry if I'm just going to a restaurant. If I'm going to sail across an ocean, I don't leave my house hungry. If I'm going to drive across the desert, I have a full meal, I hydrate myself, I get everything I need, I bring extra snacks, right? And I bring extra water. But if I'm just going to walk across the beach from here to the other beach, I still hydrate myself, even if I'm going to go meet you and have a drink with you. Because it's that important. I still breathe. I breathe the way I need to breathe, and I keep myself hydrated. How do I know that I'm properly hydrated? Well, I experiment. I'm a scientist. You have to be a scientist and know how much do you need to breathe for any given activity, how many deep breaths do you need to take every once in a while, and how much water you need to take. But the general rule is that if I watch myself every day, within a couple of days I figure out a pattern. Within about 3 weeks I can figure out what my patterns are for anything. Right? So my hydration patterns. In order for me to know that I'm properly hydrated, I need to drink enough water so that the water goes in my body and it flushes through and it goes out of my body. In other words, I need to urinate a certain number of times a day. In this type of environment, it's somewhere between 3 and 5 times a day. This body requires water flowing in. I need a certain amount of water. And I'm aware of, when I'm urinating, I'm aware of how much urine is coming out of my body. And I'm studying the quality of this urine because it's giving me information about what's happening inside of my body. Because we're 75-80% water. And without liquid water on this planet, there's no life. Okay? So, breathing properly is the first step, but staying hydrated is the next step. So the first thing I do at any given moment is take a couple of nice deep breaths, right? I'm going to leave the house, a couple of nice deep breaths. I realize, I begin to notice that my mouth is still slightly thirsty when I drink another glass of water. I'm talking a lot. I've had a certain amount of activity this morning, beyond what I normally would have, so I need to drink a little more. And I will feel how that feels in my body. And I'll be aware of the water in my stomach and how it went down. Because this is a very complex vessel. Let me give you a similar analogy. Let's say you want to ride your bike across town. What do? You get on your bicycle and you start riding, right? Maybe you check to see if the tire has air in it. But for the most part, you just get on it and you start riding it, right? And if it's low, then you realize as you're riding, oh, it's a little bit low, I need to. Let's say you want to get in your car and drive. What do? You get in the car, you start the engine. If there's no warning lights or anything like that, right, you check the gas level, right? You check the rear view mirrors, the side mirrors. You look left, you look right, put it in gear, and you start driving, right? That's it. I'm a pilot. I like to fly airplanes. When I fly my airplane, I spend 1 hour walking around the airplane. I touch every seam with my fingers. I touch every rivet on the seams of my airplane. I manually move the flaps. I kick the tires. I make sure everything is working on the outside. Then I go inside the airplane. I turn it on. I check to make sure that all the gauges are functioning. I check the fuel gauge. It's full. I don't trust it. I climb out onto it, I open up, and I look in and I put my finger in to make sure that I'm touching gas. Because I want to make sure the tanks are full. Right? Then I close it up. Then I go down and I go underneath and I drain out in a little cup, in a little bottle. I drain out the first little bit of fuel to make sure there's no water in the line. Does that make sense? Now I've checked every system on my airplane. And I've checked the weather. And I've checked with the control tower. And I have permission to taxi to the runway. So I drive my airplane. You have to get it there, and you get it. And then I'm ready. I have permission to take off. And I check in with myself one more time. And if there's any doubt, there's no doubt, I don't fly. I abort the mission, and I come back. If any part of me, if my little left toe says, I'm not feeling good about this flight, I stop. Because I'm flying an airplane. Now let's say that I take off. I take off, I'm flying. Every 15 minutes, I scan all of my instruments to make sure everything is looking properly. And I'm always looking for a potential landing site. Because if my engine's cut out, I'm going to land. Whether I walk away from it or not is a different question. Right? Now, these bodies are more complex than anything else in this part of the universe. When NASA sends up a shuttle, a space shuttle, they have hundreds of engineers and scientists, technicians, of computers with thousands of sensors. And they start the countdown days before. And if there's anything that isn't functional, they go pause, and the countdown clock stops. And then they go and they tighten the screw, loosen the screw, do this, do that, check this, right? This is more the capacity to do this is more complex than the entire space shuttle and all of NASA put together. Being able to do this, there's more things happening than in all of NASA to send one space shuttle. And yet, how do we treat our bodies? We get up, we slap some clothes on, right? We eat whatever, we jump into the world. And what we don't realize is that because we're doing things unconsciously, that we're functioning on autopilot. That autopilot is unconscious, and it was learned. All the behaviors that were learned from birth are the programming for that autopilot. How you breathe, how you hydrate yourself, how you feed yourself, how you sit, how you move, what you're interested in. All of that has unconscious roots. So if I take that level of due diligence, if I use my sensory acuity to the max, and I really pay attention to what does this body actually need to thrive, I can provide it with everything that it needs, and then it's by itself.
You get to breathe all the time.
You keep forgetting to breathe all the time. So be aware of the fact that you keep forgetting to breathe all the time.
I'm so focused on you and listening.
But be aware of that. You're so focused on me that you're not breathing. You're so focused on your job that you're not breathing. You're so focused on your partner that you're not breathing. You're so focused on whatever it is that you're doing. If focusing on something means not breathing, then you learned how to do that somewhere. And I guarantee you that if you can focus and breathe at the same time, that you will focus better. You will learn more. You'll work at a better level, right? And yet, how old are you?
31.
31? 26 and 31. You're just thinking about this now, right? But the fact that you're focusing makes you not breathe. Imagine if you've known this from day one. We've got an entire lifetime of not even thinking about something. We just take it for granted. I'm not breathing. Of course I can breathe. How can I not breathe?
Yeah.
Hopefully, if I'm not breathing, somebody knows CPR and they can help me. Right? So you have to kind of do your own CPR on yourself each breath. This is why in the old texts for awareness, they talk about breath awareness. It's not that you're supposed to learn a perfect breath and always do it. It's that you need to recognize what your behavior patterns are around your breathing so that you can become conscious of it. And when you do, you will stop doing that. You have an unconscious mechanism where you choose unconsciously to stop breathing because it allows you to focus more, and you learn how to do that. And when you recognize the root where you started, you'll stop doing it. Because the only reason that humanity is not present is because it's putting itself out of the moment. And it starts with just how you breathe. You cannot be present if you're not breathing. You cannot sustain it. Right? Does that make sense? If you're breathing in a way where you're getting overload, just sitting on a nice beach having an interesting conversation, you're already overloaded. It means that you're entering the arena unprepared. It's like you're a Formula One race car driver, you want to win the race, but you have never changed the oil. You've got 4 mismatching tires, they've got different pressure on them. Right? They're out of balance. But the stereo is doing it. Well, great when you're trying to win a race. You haven't slept the night before, right? So if you wish to be a peak performer, you need to learn these things, right? And we're going to go over all of these essentials. Right now, you're getting a sense of why it's so important to be aware of your breath, because you should be seamlessly, because I'm the one doing all the talking, and yet somehow I'm not yawning and overwhelmed with information. Right? Does that make sense? You're just sitting there passively, and okay, I'm asking you a question every once in a while, and you're overwhelmed. Your cup is full. Okay? Does that make sense? So, make sure you make note of all of these little ways in which you pull yourself out and you lose awareness with your breath, for example. Right? And as many times as you want, keep recognizing it. And then your homework for life is to find your landing space. Because you're flying an airplane, and you need to know where you're going to land, because your engine might shut out at any given point. Right? And what are you doing? You're shutting the fuel off. You're not breathing properly, you're just cutting off the power. But you're shutting the breaker off on the power. And trying to climb. That's not how you're going to go up the hill. You can't do that. Does that make sense? Okay, great. So that's how it begins. Useful? Yeah. Just breathe.
Okay, now I'm going to sing it.
It's okay.
It's so beautiful.
So, hydration. We get back to hydration, and your breath you'll get overwhelmed. I'm just talking about water, and you're going to get overwhelmed talking about water. Okay? So, this body of mine has changed over the years. I'm going to be 51 in a couple of weeks. But so far, predictably and reliably, when it breathes the way it needs to, that's the majority of the battle. Because when I'm breathing properly, I can be aware of everything else. first thing I put my awareness, my next thing I put my awareness to is my hydration level. Which means that every time I see a bottle of water, and I make sure to always have a glass of water out. There's one near my bed, there's one near my desk, there's always a bottle of water and a glass of water available. And anytime I think about it, or I see it or recognize it, I go and I drink a little bit from it. And for the past 45 or so years, since I can remember first peeing, it was 3 the first time I recognized and I was aware of the fact that I was peeing.
You remember that?
I remember that moment. And it relates to something else that we'll discuss, so I'll just throw it in right now as a little extra. I was about 3 years old and needed to pee. I was with my little friend, and she was a girl. We both suddenly needed to pee. And I stood by a tree and peed, and I watched how she squatted and peed, and I thought, oh, we're different. And that was my first awareness of my gender. My own personal awareness of my gender. I had already been gender identified as a boy on my birth certificate, and by my parents, and by my name, and by my toys, and by my clothes. My first awareness happened somewhere around the age of 3 and a half. Okay? And it had to do with peeing, and I recognized, oh, he's standing up, she's standing up. We're different. Yeah? So, since I can remember, when I drink the right amount of water, I pee between 3 and 5 times a day.
Not much.
What's that?
It's not so much.
It's not so much. My understanding is that women pee between 5 and 7 times a day. That's the average for a male and the average for a female. With smaller bladders, because you have a uterus that takes up 30% of the space or something like that for your bladder. So you're going to have to pee more often. The other thing is that when I'm healthy and balanced and relaxed and calm and I've eaten well and exercised well and everything is that I pee 3 to 5 times a day. The entire experience is always pleasurable. There's nothing unpleasant about the peeing experience. As a matter of fact, the urine is clear, light yellow, and as a biologist, I can assure you that what's coming out of your body is known as blood ultrafiltrate. That's the purification level. That's how you know what's coming out of your body. It's ultra-filtrated blood. It's whatever is in your blood. You have a cut and blood comes out. Minus the red blood cells. Minus the white blood cells, unless you have a bladder infection. Most of the nutrients stay in your body, but any excess of sugar, salts, vitamins, some proteins, some amino acids, antibodies, antigens, right, are going to be in your blood. Hormones and things like that. When this body is completely relaxed, well-fed, eating high-quality natural foods, exercising on a regular basis, sweating, dancing, playing, it urinates 3 to 5 times a day. Light yellow, clear urine that tastes like coconut water.
Coconut water.
Urine tastes like coconut.
Yes. When I'm eating the foods that this body requires. Now, if I eat a bunch of asparagus, it stinks like asparagus.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's an amazing smell.
It's recognizable. If I drink a lot of coffee, it tastes a little bit like coffee. If I drink a lot of tequila, it has a certain taste.
Yeah.
Right? That makes sense? If I eat a lot of salty foods, it's extra salty, and I know to drink more water and eat less food, less salty foods. if it has no color in it at all and it's perfectly clear like water, I know that I have my body no longer has an excess of certain vitamins, B vitamin, B water soluble vitamins. My body it only excretes, the excesses. So I drink enough water that my urine is clear once a day. But then I notice that after I've eaten, color, a little bit of scent, a little bit of color, and a little bit of flavor comes back. How do I do this? I did this because I chose to many years ago. I did a little research on it. I studied it. At first, I used to think it was disgusting. It's urine, it's pee, it's dirty. Then I realized, wait a minute, it's blood ultrafiltrate. I want to know what's in mine. So I would pee, and I would just, with my finger, just. And what I did is I created a biofeedback loop where I am aware of what I'm eating and what I'm drinking and how my body feels, and what my urine looks, smells, and tastes, looks like, smells like, and tastes like. And I do that on a regular basis. And I chose to eat the foods and create the lifestyle that allows for whatever it is that my body feels the best at. And that's how I know that I'm right there. And it feels great. As a matter of fact, it was discovered, I believe, during World War II, that you can do a direct transfusion of coconut water into a human body.
Yeah,
If someone is dying of loss of blood, you can open up that coconut with a sterile, suck out with a sterile syringe. You can suck the water out and you can inject it into somebody, and it can save their life. It will rehydrate them. So I wasn't surprised when I discovered that I could eat and live in a way that would allow my urine to taste like coconut water. Slightly sweet, slightly salty, yellow, very light, clear yellow. And it's like when you check your oil and it's all black and sticky and gunky, so it's time to change the oil in your car. Well, you check it and it's clear and it's fluid. So that's how I know that my hydration levels are. So I chose to study this as my own inner biologist, my own scientist, to determine how can I breathe and hydrate myself so that I can keep my body balanced. You need sample size, right? You can't determine anything by one sample. So if you check yourself, check how you're breathing on a regular basis, eventually something will click. Check your hydration levels, pay attention to how often you're drinking, how much you're drinking, right? Check your urine, pay attention to your urine, and eventually something will click. You have natural pattern recognition thought processes that you want to allow them to discover the patterns. Do you want to go in there with a sense of curiosity and wonder? And, I wonder, what can I do? Like, I've made it so far in life, right? You're healthy, right? You've created a nice enough lifestyle that you can come here to a little remote beach in Thailand and have the time, right? At whatever level of resources and resourcefulness, you've made it this far. There are people that are stuck in all places. Right? So you've made it this far with where you're at. The question is, can you fine tune it? Can you calibrate that? Can you perfect that? There's a science to it and there's an art to it. So the science part is first understanding what your biology is, and then once you get the baseline understanding, then you can be creative. There's things you can do with your breath. There's things you can do with hydration. There's things you can do with food, right? That will allow you to learn things about yourself. But you need to set the standard first. You need to have the controlled experiments, right? So as a scientist, as a biologist, I'm looking for what are the baseline control conditions that I need in order to just feel good, wake up feeling good, relaxed, energized, alert, ready to whatever life has to offer. Once I establish that, then I can go and look for the more extreme conditions. But one thing that's absolutely clear for me it's just a fact, is that, breath is an essential factor. And hydration is an essential factor. And if I can handle hydration, I can handle just about anything that's coming my way. If I have nothing else, I'm good for weeks. Because I've mastered understanding how this body works. This body has mastered itself. It knows how to breathe for any given situation. It knows how to hydrate itself. It can control its water levels. I've done experiments where I've gone out into the Mojave Desert in Southern California to see how little water I can, with water, to see how little water I can go on under different conditions.
Wow.
Just for the fun of it, just to see what would happen.
What would happen? How long did you do that?
Oh, I'd go out once a week to once a month. I'd go out and just go camping for a weekend, like almost every weekend. I'd go out to the desert and just see how I did in extreme conditions. Go out to Death Valley, it's super hot. How much water do you actually need? Back on the final note on the urine thing, your body will hold a certain amount of urine, which can be recycled. You can drink it. It's water, vitamins, and nutrients, which could extend your life-saving situation by days. There's a number of times you can recycle your urine before it becomes too strong, too toxic, and you want to get rid of it. And you have to know the difference. Because maybe one day you're in a city where there's a bombing, or there's an elevator shaft that goes down, or you're stuck somewhere and you have no water, and people begin to panic, and I know how much water I need, I know how much food I need, I don't need to panic over food and water, right? I don't need to worry about how much air I need. This body knows what it needs to thrive, and it knows what it needs to survive. That gives me a peace of mind under extreme situations. Because I've gone to the extremes. What do I need to survive? What do I need to thrive? And now I can create the conditions so that I can thrive. And it's very extreme. If I can thrive, then when things get very extreme, then I have a better chance of surviving. What are their chances of surviving? If they're barely surviving, then nothing's happening. Right? Just for fun. I'm an explorer. I like to climb mountains. I like to fly airplanes. I like to sail oceans. I like to put myself in extreme conditions. So I like to skydive and I jump out of airplanes, but I use a backup, right? Because I might need it. Right? So I'd like to know how this body works. Along the way, I discovered that you can treat your body in a way that will allow it to have a unique flowering experience that only happens when you treat it in the right way. And as an example, we have a greenhouse where we grow all sorts of things, and we like orchids. And we have orchid hunters that go into the jungles, and they find orchids for us that are orchids that are very rare. They flower once a season for a week or something like that. They flower twice a year, once a year, twice a year. And they bring them back, and we take pictures of them and send the information to an orchid specialist that we know in Chiang Mai. And he gives us the exact conditions this plant needs. We can recreate those conditions, and the plant will flower year-round. Because in the deep jungle, it needs, in the middle of the monsoon season, when it gets just the right amount of rain and nutrients and light and good temperature, we can give it the right amount of nutrients here. Why wait to have a unique, creative, or intuitive flowering when you can just give yourself the conditions you need for your body to have it by itself? Before you can do that, you need to identify all the things you do that prevent your body from having natural, spontaneous flowering experiences. Not being aware of your breath is one of the things, letting it happen unconsciously is one of the things that we all do that prevent us from being present in the moment. Or being too overconscious of it and always breathing in a certain way. Because then the body isn't being natural. It's being told what to do by the mind.
Oxygenation graph. Here what we see is that the level of oxygen and carbon dioxide that we intake has an impact on the pH, or the level of acidity in our blood, where if we have a low amount of oxygen and a high amount of carbon dioxide in our blood, like when we're under breathing, our blood levels can be dangerously acidic. When we have even breaths in and even breaths out, this is we're in a neutral zone, which allows us peak performance. And if we overbreathe or hyperventilate, then our body goes into a certain degree of alkalosis, where we have more oxygen in our blood and less carbon dioxide. And this also results in a loss of function and also puts us into fight or flight. So for most of us, in a modern life of today, we want to be able to maintain nice, steady, even breaths in and out. So if we have a low level of activity, we have small breath in, small breath out, small breath in, small breath out, nice and slow, nice and relaxed, like when we're sleeping. Our pH is neutral. And then as we engage in greater and greater levels of activity, we want to be able to breathe in and out more oxygen and breathe out more carbon dioxide. By doing that, we maintain nice peak performance breaths. So for example, if I want to go for a run, or I'm going to dance, or I'm going to have some form of intense physical activity, I make sure to breathe deeper, stronger, faster breaths in and nice, strong breaths out. And if I have a very intense physical activity, I'm making sure to breathe in as much oxygen as I can and breathe out all the carbon dioxide as quickly as possible, because I want to be able to stay at peak performance. So this is something that you can test. And I have a series of breathing exercises for you to try that allow you to experience what happens when your body goes from being neutral to alkaline, back to neutral, to acidic, and then back up to neutral again. And these are included at the end of our program. Hydration level and performance graph. So what we're looking at this graph is we're looking at our body has a specific amount of water that allows us to perform at peak performance. Because remember, our cells are like tiny little batteries, and they have electrolytes and they have a certain amount of water. And the 30, 50, 100 trillion cells in our bodies, each with a tiny, tiny microliter amount of water, each of these cells need a certain amount of water in order to function properly as batteries. So we have a 2-liter window of water where we can lose up to 2 liters of water and still stay within good performance. And then we have like a window of like 1 liter plus or minus half a liter of water, which is just a couple of glasses of water, right? So as long as we stay in this range here, we're in the good. And if we stay in this range, we're at peak performance. In other words, too much water can reduce our performance. And if you drink way too much water, you can have water poisoning. You can actually hurt yourself because you can lose too many electrolytes. Same as if you become dehydrated. As you lose hydration levels, you can reduce your efficiency, and of course we can die of dehydration. So it's important to, once again, learn how to titrate, learn how to calibrate, learn how to just figure out how much water the unique individual thinking, feeling body needs in order to performance, for your performance to be at peak, or at least at good performance. So, and then we're looking at our activity levels and how our water levels will drop. So you have a glass of water before going to bed because you're going to lose some water. You're going to sweat it out, especially if you're in a climate controlled space where there's drying air conditioning or heating, or you're in a very hot place. Your body has a capacity to lose water, but you can figure out how much water you need to drink to be able to sleep 8 hours and wake up at peak performance without having to get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. Then you wake up and you drink a liter of water, and that brings you to peak performance. And then depending on whether you're having low level, medium level, high level, or extra high level of activity, our hydration levels will drop. In other words, we can consume and use a liter of water in 8 hours if we're laying quietly and not doing anything. In 4 hours, if we have a low level of activity, we can lose a liter of water in an hour, in as little as half an hour, or in as little as 15 minutes. You can lose a liter of water in 15 minutes. This is a technique, for example, that I learned when I was wrestling in high school. If I needed to weigh in at a certain weight and I was a couple of pounds higher than, I would put on some sweats. I'd go into the locker room bathroom. I'd turn on the hot showers, and I would run around and do jumping jacks and sweat the water away. I would wrap aluminum foil around my legs, under my sweats, and around my tummy. And in 15 minutes, I could lose a kilo of water. Weigh myself in, drink a liter of water, and I'm at peak performance again, ready to go out and win my wrestling match. So it's very important to learn, once again, you're a subjective scientist. Your body is a unique individual thinking, feeling body that consumes and releases water under different conditions. And learning to be thirsty before you need water. Drinking, always having a glass of water before leaving a source of water to go out on the road or for a meal or even to go out for a drink or to go out for a run or for an extreme experience. You bring along the amount of water that you need in order to be able to, over a 24-hour period, stay at peak performance. And at the very least, stay at good level performance. And what you want to avoid is going into the caution or danger zones. And this is something that only you can figure out for yourself. It just requires paying attention to yourself and how you consume water under different conditions. All right, so here's an example of what low hydration levels would look like. So let's say that you went to bed and you had a glass of water and you woke up and you were at peak performance and at the bottom of it. And you had a glass of water, a glass of juice, and you also had a coffee. And then you went out and you didn't think about drinking water for a couple of hours. Well, the coffee, the caffeine in certain beverages acts as a diuretic. So you sweat water, you lose water, and you start to feel thirsty because you start to feel a little tired and thirsty and headachy. So you drink some water, and now you're at good level. So you feel good because you just drank some water. And what you don't know is that you could have drank a little more and gotten yourself up to here. But so you stay here, and then you drop back down, and you're busy at work, you're studying, you're busy at your work, whatever you're doing, and you start to get really tired. So you feel dizzy, you drink some water, and you stay here. And then most people are kind of at this level. And when you're at this level, your body goes into hypnagogic state. And then at some point you'll feel really tired, and then you'll drink something, you'll eat something, some fruit, something that hydrates you enough to bring you to good levels. And a lot of people just stay at this level. And this affects your performance tremendously. Just like having inappropriate blood sugar levels with spikes and drops. The same thing can happen with water. And between having poor blood sugar levels and having low hydration levels, we're losing 50, 60, 70, 80, 90% of our capacity to function, of our peak performance. So this is something really to be mindful of. And once again, you figure it out by studying yourself, by bringing awareness to your hydration levels, so that you can figure out how to stay at peak performance.